Welcome to English Total Grammar Lessons. Chapter 22. Phrasal Verbs. Today we're going to talk about phrasal verbs, which are a very particular set of verbs, and how you can use them in conversation. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We upload content to help you improve your English every week. Alright then, let's talk about phrasal verbs. These are verb phrases which are formed by a verb plus a particle. They are very common in English. Here are some examples.
It's cold. I will turn up the heating.
We need to put off the next meeting.
I agree.
Great, let's dig a little deeper. As we saw in the examples, phrasal verbs are formed by having a verb and particle, often a preposition or an adverb, which often changes the usual meaning of the verb. Here are two examples. The first is the verb to turn, which means to move in a circular direction. You can use turn plus the preposition off, which means to stop the operation of, as follows.
Please turn off the TV.
You can also use turn plus the preposition up, which means to increase the level of something, as follows.
Can you turn up the heating?
Another example is the verb get, one of the most used verbs in English, which basically means to receive. You can use get plus the preposition up to mean to rise from bed. For instance,
It's time to get up now.
you can also use get with the preposition on, which means to board.
It's hard to get on the metro.
These are just two examples of commonly used phrasal verbs. As you can see, the difficulty lies in the fact that, often, the base meaning of verbs can change based on the context in which they are used and the particle that is attached to them. This is why many people struggle with phrasal verbs. Let's move on to the next section. Now we are going to talk about verbs which require an object. These are known as transitive verbs. They require an object to complete their meaning. Let's see some examples that show how this works. Let's take the phrasal verb to turn on, for instance.
Hey, can you please turn on the lights?
As you can see in this case, this verb needs the object lights in order to make sense. Using the verb with no object does not really say much. Here are two more examples using other verbs.
I need to back up these files today.
Josh is going to help set up my computer.
Let's take a moment now to look at transitive phrasal verbs in more detail. Most phrasal verbs that require an object are separable. This basically means that you can use the verb phrase followed by the object, or you can place the object between the verb and its particle. This is what often occurs in conversation. Let's again look at some examples using the verb to turn on. You can use turn on followed by the object, or you can use turn followed by the object, and then the preposition on. For example,
Hey, can you please turn on the lights?
or
Hey, can you please turn the lights on?
Easy, right? Interestingly, you could also use object pronouns. Like this.
Hey, can you please turn them on?
However, in this last case, you should know that object pronouns always go between the verb and the particle, never after the phrasal verb. Something to keep in mind. Let's continue. There are also phrasal verbs that do not require an object in order to make sense. These verbs are known as intransitive verbs. Here are some examples.
I have to get up now.
Our car keeps breaking down.
The plane is taking off now.
Intransitive verbs express a complete thought, which is why they don't require an object. This also means that they cannot be separated from the particle. Finally, one thing to note is that phrasal verbs follow the same grammar rules as other verbs. This means that you can use them in any tense following the patterns we have already covered in previous videos. Here are some examples to illustrate this point.
I didn't turn off the lights before I left my house.
Josh is setting up my computer.
Next week, we will back up all our files.
Keep this in mind when using phrasal verbs in conversation. Okay, time to recap. Today you have learned how phrasal verbs can be used in conversation. You have learned that there are two types of phrasal verbs: transitive, which require an object, and intransitive, which do not. You have also learned that phrasal verbs follow the same rules as other verbs in English and can be used in different tenses. Phrasal verbs are not intrinsically difficult, but there are many possible combinations and at times they can be confusing. Take the time to learn them in context rather than memorize lists of phrasal verbs. That's all for today. We hope this lesson was useful. Check out the quick test posted in the comments section below to test your command of phrasal verbs. Give us a like or leave us a comment. We really appreciate your feedback. Thanks for watching. This is the end of chapter 22.